The wedding dress hanging in Penelope Bradford's bedroom had been stitched by her mother's own hands, but as she stared at the cream-colored silk in the lamplight of that August evening in 1882, all she felt was a churning sickness in her stomach that wouldn't subside. 3 days ago, she had overheard a conversation that shattered everything she thought she knew about Marcus Webb, the man her family believed would make her a respectable wife. The man who had courted her with flowers and sweet words for 6 months. The man who had lied about nearly everything. Penelope pressed her palms against the windowsill of her family's modest home on the outskirts of Helena, Montana, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The town had grown considerably since gold was discovered nearby, and with that growth came all manner of people, honest and otherwise. Marcus Webb had arrived last spring, claiming to be a successful businessman from Denver with investments in cattle ranching and mining operations. Her father, George Bradford, a hard-working blacksmith who had built his reputation on honesty and integrity, had been impressed by Marcus's apparent wealth and connections. Her mother, Ellen, had been charmed by his manners and his promise to provide Penelope with a comfortable life. But 3 nights ago, Penelope had been walking past the Lucky Dollar Saloon on her way home from delivering her father's supper to the smithy when she heard Marcus's voice drifting through an open window. She had paused, not meaning to eavesdrop, but something in his tone made her freeze. He was laughing, and another man was asking him about his upcoming wedding. The blacksmith's daughter, Marcus had said, his words slightly slurred from whiskey. Pretty enough, I suppose, but it's her father's connections I'm after. The man knows every rancher and mine owner within 50 miles. Once I'm family, I'll have access to business I could never get on my own. The other man had asked about Marcus's mining investments, and Marcus had laughed again, harder this time. I don't have a damn dime in any mine. I've been living on credit and borrowed money for months. But the Bradfords don't know that. Once I marry the girl, I'll have respectability. Her father will help me get established, thinking he's helping his son-in-law. By the time anyone figures out the truth, I'll have made my fortune or moved on. Penelope had stood there in the darkening street, her whole body trembling. Everything Marcus had told them was a lie. The successful business, the Denver connections, the financial security he promised to provide. All of it fabricated to win her family's trust and her hand in marriage. She had walked home in a daze that night, and for 3 days she had tried to find the courage to tell her parents. But every time she opened her mouth, she saw the hope in her mother's eyes, the pride in her father's face. They were so pleased that their only daughter would be well cared for. How could she tell them they had been deceived? How could she prove what she had heard now? As darkness fell over Helena, Penelope made her decision. Tomorrow was Sunday, and the wedding was scheduled for the following Saturday. She had to tell her parents the truth tonight, regardless of whether they believed her. She found them in the kitchen, her mother kneading dough for tomorrow's bread while her father repaired a broken chair leg. They looked up when she entered and her mother smiled. "Penelope, dear, you look pale. Are you feeling well?" Pre-wedding nerves. Penelope sat down at the table, clasping her hands together to stop them from shaking. "Mother, father, I need to tell you something about Marcus. It's important." Her father set down his tools, his weathered face creasing with concern. "What is it, daughter?" The words tumbled out, everything she had heard outside the saloon. She watched her parents' expressions change from concern to confusion to disbelief. When she finished, silence filled the kitchen except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. "Penelope," her mother said slowly, "are you certain you heard correctly? Perhaps you misunderstood." "I know what I heard, Mother. He was bragging about deceiving us, about using Father's reputation for his own gain. Everything he told us about his business and his wealth, it's all lies." Her father's jaw tightened. These are serious accusations. If you're wrong, you'll be insulting a man who has done nothing but treat you with courtesy. And if I'm right, Father, I cannot marry a man who has lied to us all. I won't. George Bradford stood, his large frame filling the small kitchen. I'll speak with him. Tomorrow before church. If there's any truth to this, I'll know. But Penelope shook her head. He'll deny it all. He's been lying for months. What makes you think he'll suddenly tell the truth when confronted? Her mother wrung her hands. What do you suggest we do? The invitations have been sent. The whole town expects a wedding. I would rather face embarrassment than marry a liar, Penelope said firmly. I'll call off the wedding myself if I must. Her father studied her for a long moment. Let me make some inquiries first, quietly. I know a man who does business in Denver. I'll send a telegram tomorrow and ask about Marcus Webb. We'll know the truth within a few days. The wedding is in 6 days, Penelope reminded him. Then we'll have time enough. If Marcus Webb is who he says he is, you'll apologize and marry him as planned. If not, there will be no wedding. I won't have my daughter married to a fraud. Penelope wanted to argue that they should act immediately, but she recognized the set of her father's jaw. He was a deliberate man who believed in facts and evidence. Thank you, Father, she said quietly. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she dressed for church and steeled herself to face Marcus with the knowledge of his deception. He arrived at their house in his rented buggy, looking handsome in his Sunday suit, and greeted her parents with his usual charm. Penelope forced herself to smile and accept his arm as they walked to the small church at the center of Helena. During the service, she couldn't concentrate on the sermon. She kept glancing at Marcus from the corner of her eye, seeing him differently now. How had she ever believed his smooth words? How had she mistaken his calculated attentiveness for genuine affection? After church, as people gathered outside to socialize, Penelope saw a man she didn't recognize speaking with the pastor. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. He wore simple clothes, a work shirt and denim trousers, with a worn leather vest. A cowboy, clearly, though he had removed his hat respectfully for church. Something about the way he stood, straight and honest, caught her attention. Marcus noticed her looking. Some drifter, probably looking for work, he said dismissively. Helena attracts all sorts. The pastor gestured toward her father, and the stranger walked over. Penelope watched as her father shook the man's hand warmly. Penelope, her father called, come meet Fletcher Nash. He's the man I told you about who worked that job for me last spring. Fletcher, this is my daughter, Penelope, and her betrothed, Marcus Webb. Fletcher Nash tipped his head politely, and when his eyes met Penelope's, she felt an unexpected jolt. His eyes were a clear gray blue, direct and honest in a way that made her throat tighten. Here was a man who looked at you straight with nothing to hide. Pleased to meet you, Miss Bradford, Fletcher said. His voice was deep and measured. Mr. Webb. Marcus barely acknowledged him with a nod, already turning away. George, I was hoping to discuss something with you this week. But her father was still talking to Fletcher. I'm glad you came back through Helena. I have a job that needs doing if you're interested. Some fencing work at the property I bought north of town. I'd be happy to help, sir, Fletcher replied. Penelope found herself wanting to hear more of his voice, to know more about this quiet cowboy who seemed so different from the polished but false Marcus. But Marcus was guiding her away, back toward the buggy. That evening, her father showed her the telegram he had sent to his contact in Denver. Now, there was nothing to do but wait. The next 3 days were torture. Penelope went through the motions of final wedding preparations while her mind churned with anxiety. Marcus came to call each afternoon, and she had to sit with him in the parlor, making conversation while everything in her recoiled from his presence. On Wednesday afternoon, she told her mother she needed air and went for a walk. Her feet carried her toward the north edge of town, where her father's new property lay. She didn't admit to herself that she hoped to see Fletcher Nash working there, but when she spotted him mending a fence line in the distance, her heart beat faster. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle him or seem forward. He looked up when she was still several yards away, straightening from his work. "Miss Bradford," he said, surprise evident in his voice, "is everything all right?" "I was just walking," she said, then felt foolish. Young women didn't just wander alone to empty properties. "I wanted to see how the work was progressing." Fletcher glanced at the fence, then back at her. "It's coming along. Your father wants it finished by the end of the week." An awkward silence fell between them. Penelope knew she should turn around and go home, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Finally, Fletcher spoke again. "Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, Miss Bradford, but you don't seem much like a happy bride." The observation, delivered so quietly and without judgment, made tears spring to her eyes. She blinked them back quickly. "What makes you say that?" "I've seen happy people and I've seen troubled people." "You're troubled." He paused. "Again, forgive me, it's not my business." "No," Penelope said quickly. "No, you're right. I am troubled." She didn't know what possessed her, but suddenly she was telling this stranger everything. The overheard conversation, her father's telegram, the wait for confirmation. All the fear and anger and confusion poured out of her. Fletcher listened without interrupting, his steady gaze never leaving her face. When she finally fell silent, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "My father used to say that a liar makes a poor husband," he said. "He told me that when I was young, after a neighbor woman ran off because her husband had been lying about his gambling debts. Truth is the foundation of everything," he said. "Without it, there's nothing to build on." The words resonated deep in Penelope's chest. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. Died 5 years ago, him and my mother both, when fever swept through our town in Texas. But I've tried to live by what he taught me." "I'm sorry for your loss," Penelope said softly. Fletcher nodded his thanks. "The point is, Miss Bradford, you're right to be concerned. If this Marcus Webb has been lying, you deserve better. Any woman deserves better than a foundation of lies. My parents want proof before they'll call off the wedding. They sent a telegram to Denver. Then you'll have your proof soon enough. And if it confirms what you heard, you'll do the right thing. I can see that in you." Something about his certainty made her feel stronger. "What if the whole town thinks I'm foolish? What if people say I threw away a good match? Better to face embarrassment than a lifetime of regret." Fletcher picked up his hammer. "You strike me as a woman with courage, Miss Bradford. Trust yourself." Penelope walked home feeling lighter than she had in days. That night she slept better. Thursday morning, her father received the response telegram. She was in the kitchen with her mother when he came home from the telegraph office, his face grim. He laid the paper on the table without a word. Penelope picked it up with trembling hands. The message was brief but damning. Marcus Webb had left Denver 6 months ago owing money to multiple creditors. He had no mining investments, no cattle business. He was a confidence man who had pulled similar schemes in 2 other cities. Her mother made a small sound of distress. Her father's face was hard as stone. "I'll speak with him today," George Bradford said. "The wedding is canceled." "Let me be there," Penelope said. "I deserve to confront him myself." Her father looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in her expression made him nod. "Very well." They sent word for Marcus to come to the house that afternoon. Penelope changed into one of her simpler dresses, not the nice one she usually wore for his visits. She wanted no pretense today. Marcus arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, his smile confident as always. That smile faltered when he saw both Penelope and her father waiting in the parlor, their expressions cold. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his voice taking on a careful note. George Bradford didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We know the truth, Mr. Webb. Or should I say, we know the lies. Every word you've told us about your business, your investments, your situation in Denver, all of it false." Marcus's face went pale, then flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who has been spreading lies about me?" "The lies are yours," Penelope said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I heard you myself, bragging in the saloon about how you were deceiving us, about how you planned to use my father's reputation for your own gain." Marcus looked at her, and for the first time she saw calculation in his eyes instead of false warmth. "You were eavesdropping on a private conversation, and thank God she was," her father said. "We sent a telegram to Denver. Your creditors remember you well. As do several families you swindled with similar schemes." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Penelope watched Marcus's face cycle through several expressions: denial, anger, fear, before settling into cold resentment. "Fine," he said flatly. "So you've discovered my circumstances aren't quite what I represented. That doesn't change the fact that we would have had a good marriage. I could have built something here with your father's help." "Built on lies." Penelope felt anger surge through her. "Did you ever care about me at all, or was I only ever a means to an end?" Marcus shrugged, the gesture careless and cruel. "Does it matter? You're a pretty girl, Penelope, but let's be honest. You're the daughter of a blacksmith. I was offering you a better life than you could have hoped for otherwise." Her father took a step forward, his fists clenched. "Get out of my house. If you're still in Helena by tomorrow morning, I'll have the sheriff run you out of town." Marcus's lip curled. "This backwater town has nothing for me anyway." He looked at Penelope one last time. "You'll regret this. You'll end up married to some dirt-poor cowboy or rancher, working yourself to death. I was your chance for something better." "A life of lies isn't better," Penelope said. "It's nothing at all. My father was right. A liar makes a poor husband." Marcus left without another word. Penelope heard the door slam and felt her legs go weak. She sank into a chair, her mother rushing to her side. "It's over," Ellen Bradford said, stroking her daughter's hair. "You're safe now." But Penelope knew the hard part was just beginning. The wedding invitations had been sent. The whole town would be talking. She had to face the embarrassment and the questions. The next morning, her mother helped her compose a brief announcement that the wedding was canceled due to irreconcilable differences. Her father took it to the newspaper office and to the pastor. By afternoon, everyone in Helena knew. Penelope stayed home for 2 days, unable to face the inevitable stares and whispers. On Sunday, her mother gently insisted she come to church. "Hiding will only make it worse, dear. Hold your head high. You did nothing wrong." So Penelope dressed in her Sunday best and walked into church with her parents. She felt every eye on her as they took their seats. The whispers rustled through the congregation like wind through dry grass. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to show how much it hurt. After the service, several of the older women approached her mother with sympathetic words. A few younger women gave Penelope pitying looks that made her want to scream. She was standing alone near the church steps, wondering if she could slip away, when she heard a familiar voice. "Miss Bradford." She turned to find Fletcher Nash, hat in hand, looking at her with those honest gray-blue eyes. "Mr. Nash," she said, grateful for a friendly face. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad you found out the truth before the wedding." "Thank you." "So am I, though the aftermath is proving difficult." Fletcher glanced at the people still clustered near the church, many watching their conversation with interest. "Would you take a walk with me, unless that would be improper?" Penelope knew it would set tongues wagging even more, but she found she didn't care. "I would like that very much." They walked in silence for a while, leaving the church behind. Helena was beautiful in the late summer, the mountains rising dramatic against the blue sky, the air crisp and clean. Fletcher led her toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land. "I finished your father's fence yesterday," he said. "He's asked me to stay on for some other jobs. I've been thinking about settling here for a while. I'm tired of drifting." "Why did you start?" Penelope asked. "Drifting, I mean. After my parents died, there was nothing keeping me in Texas. I sold the family ranch and just started moving. Worked cattle drives, ranch jobs, whatever I could find. Saw a lot of country. But lately, I've been thinking it's time to put down roots somewhere." "Helena is a good town," Penelope said. "Growing fast with the mining." Fletcher stopped walking and turned to face her. "Miss Bradford, I hope you won't think me forward, but I need to say something. I can't stop thinking about you, about how brave you were standing up for yourself. About how you deserved so much better than what Marcus Webb offered." Penelope's heart was suddenly pounding. "Mr. Nash, I'm not a wealthy man," he continued. "I've saved some money over the years, enough to buy a small ranch if I'm careful. I can't offer you silk dresses or fancy houses. But I can promise you honesty, complete honesty always, and I'd work every day to make you happy if you'd give me the chance." "Are you asking to court me?" Penelope whispered. "We barely know each other." "Then let's get to know each other, properly, with no lies and no pretense." His eyes searched hers. "I know the timing is poor, right after what you've been through. But I'm leaving in a few days for a cattle drive to Denver. I'll be gone 2 months. I needed you to know how I feel before I left, so you'd know I'm coming back for you." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the tears she had cried over Marcus's betrayal. These were tears of something like hope. "I would like to know you better, Fletcher Nash," she said softly. "I would like that very much." His smile transformed his serious face. "Then when I come back in October, may I call on you properly?" "Yes. I'll be waiting." They walked back to town slowly, talking about small things, his work, her life in Helena, the books they had read, the places they had been. By the time he left her at her family's door, Penelope felt like she had known him for years instead of days. Her mother was in the kitchen when she came inside. "You were gone quite a while with Mr. Nash. He asked if he could court me when he returns from a cattle drive in October." Ellen Bradford set down the dish she was drying and studied her daughter. "And what did you tell him?" "I said yes." "Is that foolish, Mother? So soon after Marcus?" Her mother came over and took her hands. "Marcus was never worthy of you, and you knew it in your heart before you knew it in your head. That's why you were so troubled. But this Fletcher Nash, your father speaks highly of him. Says he's one of the most honest, hard-working men he's ever met. He told me a liar makes a poor husband. That truth is the foundation of everything. Then he's a wise man as well as an honest one. No, daughter, I don't think you're being foolish. I think you're following your heart towards something real." Fletcher left Helena 3 days later, but not before coming to speak with Penelope's father. George Bradford gave his permission for Fletcher to court Penelope when he returned, and the two men shook hands with the kind of respect that meant more than any fancy words. The 2 months that followed were the longest of Penelope's life. She threw herself into helping her mother with the household and taking on mending work to earn extra money. The town's gossip about her canceled wedding gradually faded as newer scandals emerged. A few men tried to call on her, but she politely refused them all. Fletcher sent 2 letters during his time away. They were brief and filled with details about the cattle drive and the weather, but between the lines, Penelope read his growing affection. She wrote back, longer letters about her days and her thoughts, surprised by how easy it was to open her heart to him on paper. October arrived with the first hints of autumn coloring the mountain slopes. Penelope found herself watching the roads into Helena, hoping for Fletcher's return. Finally, on a bright afternoon in mid-October, he rode into town on a dust-covered horse, leading a pack mule behind him. She was in the general store when word spread that Fletcher Nash was back. She forced herself to finish her shopping calmly, but her hands trembled as she carried her parcels home. He came to call that very evening, freshly bathed and shaved, holding his hat nervously. Her father invited him into the parlor, and her mother served coffee while the four of them talked. After a proper interval, her parents excused themselves, leaving Fletcher and Penelope alone under the watchful eye of propriety with the parlor door open. "I missed you," Fletcher said simply. "Every day on that drive, I thought about getting back here to you." "I missed you too," Penelope admitted. "Your letters meant more to me than you know. I've been thinking, and I want to be completely honest with you about my situation. I saved most of my pay from the drive. Combined with what I already had, I have enough to buy the Harrison Ranch. It's a small place about 50 miles north of here, needs work. The house is barely more than a cabin. It would be a hard life, especially the first few years." "Why are you telling me this?" Fletcher leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because I'm not just courting you for fun, Penelope. I'm courting you with the intention of marriage if you'll have me. But I need you to know exactly what that would mean. I'm not going to lie to you or exaggerate my circumstances to make myself look better. You deserve the truth, good and bad." Penelope felt warmth spread through her chest. Here was a man who would never deceive her, who respected her enough to be completely honest even if it made him look less appealing. "I appreciate your honesty. There's more. I talked to your father about buying some land closer to Helena instead, so you'd be near your family. He offered to help me find something, but that would mean taking longer to save enough, maybe another year of working for wages." "What do you want, Fletcher?" He smiled slightly. "I want to marry you and build a life together. Whether that's on a ranch 50 miles away or on a small piece of land right here, I don't care as long as you're with me." "We've known each other such a short time," Penelope said, though her heart was already sure. "I know. That's why I'm not proposing tonight. I want to court you properly, let you get to know me, make sure you're certain. I'll take whatever time you need." They courted through the fall and into the winter. Fletcher took work at a nearby ranch, staying in the bunkhouse but spending every Sunday and most evenings in town with Penelope. They took long walks, sat in her family's parlor talking for hours, attended church socials together. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about his parents and the values they had instilled in him. She told him about growing up in Helena, about her dreams and fears. The more time Penelope spent with Fletcher, the more certain she became. He was everything Marcus had pretended to be: steady, honorable, hardworking, kind. But more than that, he was real. He didn't try to impress her with false stories or empty promises. When he talked about the future, he was honest about the challenges they would face and realistic about what he could provide. In December, during the Christmas season, Fletcher took her for a ride in her father's sleigh out to the property her father had helped him find. It was a beautiful piece of land just north of Helena, with a creek running through it and mountains rising in the distance. "I bought it last week," Fletcher said as they stood looking out over the snow-covered acreage. 20 acres, with timber and good grazing. "It's not much yet, but I plan to build a house in the spring. A real house, not a cabin, big enough for a family." Penelope turned to him, her breath misting in the cold air. "Fletcher." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Penelope Bradford. I think I started falling in love with you that first day after church when you looked so troubled, and I've been falling deeper ever since. You're the strongest, bravest, most honest woman I've ever met. I want to spend my life with you, building something real and true together. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks as she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, I love you too. I'll marry you." He kissed her then, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she pressed closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he laughed and spun her around in the snow. "I'll talk to your father tonight. If he agrees, we can get married in the spring when the house is built." But George Bradford, when Fletcher formally asked for his daughter's hand that evening, suggested a winter wedding instead. "You've proven yourself to me, son. I've watched how you treat my daughter, how hard you work, how you keep your word. I'd be honored to have you as a son-in-law. Why wait until spring? You can stay with us until the house is built. It's what family does." Fletcher looked at Penelope, who nodded eagerly. "Then we'll marry as soon as the pastor can arrange it," he said. They were married in early January of 1883 in the same church where Penelope had almost married Marcus Webb. But this wedding was completely different. Penelope wore a new dress her mother made, simpler than the first one but more beautiful because it represented something real. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and when Fletcher took her hands and spoke his vows, every word rang with truth and love. The reception was held at her family's home, with friends and neighbors crowding in to celebrate. More than one person remarked that they had never seen Penelope look so happy. She and Fletcher danced in the cleared parlor, his arms strong around her, and she felt a contentment she had never known existed. That night, in the small room her parents had prepared for them, Fletcher held her close and whispered against her hair. "I promise you, Penelope, I will never lie to you, not about big things or small things. You have my word." "I know," she said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "I trust you completely." They spent the winter months living with her parents while Fletcher worked on building their house. Penelope helped where she could, and on Sundays they would ride out to watch the progress. The frame went up in February, the walls and roof in March. By April, it was ready to move into, though many details still needed finishing. Their first night in their own home, Fletcher carried Penelope over the threshold of the simple but sturdy house he had built with his own hands. Every nail, every board, every window frame represented his love and his commitment to building a life with her. "It's not fancy," he said, setting her down gently, "but it's ours and it's built on truth." Penelope looked around at the plain wooden walls, the simple furniture Fletcher had constructed, the stone fireplace that would keep them warm. "It's perfect. It's everything I want." That summer, they planted a garden and Fletcher bought cattle to graze on their land. Penelope learned ranching alongside her husband, discovering strengths she hadn't known she possessed. The work was hard, but they faced it together. And every evening when they sat on their porch watching the sunset, she felt grateful for the honesty that had brought them together. In October, Penelope discovered she was expecting their first child. Fletcher received the news with joy, immediately becoming even more protective and attentive. He finished the interior of the house, adding shelves and cabinets, and a cradle he carved himself during the long winter evenings. Their son was born in May of 1884, a healthy boy with his father's gray-blue eyes. They named him Thomas, after Fletcher's father. Holding their baby while Fletcher sat beside them on their bed, his arm around her shoulders, Penelope felt overwhelmed with happiness. "He's perfect," Fletcher said softly, touching the baby's tiny hand. "You're perfect. I'm the luckiest man alive." "We're both lucky," Penelope said. "That I overheard Marcus's lies, that you came to Helena, that we found each other." Fletcher kissed her forehead. "Not luck, truth. The truth set you free from a terrible mistake, and the truth brought us together. Over the next years, their ranch grew slowly but steadily. Fletcher's reputation for honesty and hard work brought him respect throughout the territory. Other ranchers sought his advice and his help. Penelope became known for her strength and her kindness, often helping neighboring families in times of trouble. They had 3 more children, 2 daughters and another son. The house Fletcher had built proved big enough for their growing family, though they added a room when the 4th child arrived. The ranch became prosperous, not wealthy by any means, but comfortable and secure. Penelope's parents grew older, and eventually, George Bradford handed over his blacksmithing business to an apprentice and retired. He and Ellen spent much of their time at the ranch, doting on their grandchildren and helping where they could. One evening, sitting on the porch as they had done countless times over the years, Fletcher took Penelope's hand and looked at her with the same direct honesty that had first captured her heart. "You ever think about how different your life would have been if you had married Marcus Webb?" Penelope shuddered. "Sometimes, it terrifies me to think how close I came to such a terrible mistake. You would have figured it out eventually. You're too smart and too strong to have stayed with a liar." "Maybe, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out." "I'm grateful every day for what we have, Fletcher, for the life we've built on truth and love." He squeezed her hand. "A liar makes a poor husband, but an honest man with an honest woman, that's the foundation for something that lasts forever." Their children grew up in that house Fletcher built, learning the values their parents lived by. Honesty, hard work, kindness, love. Thomas took over the ranch when he was old enough, expanding it further. Their daughters married good men from nearby ranches. Men Fletcher and Penelope carefully vetted to ensure they were honest and worthy. As Penelope grew older, she often thought about that August evening in 1882 when she had stood staring at a wedding dress, sick with the knowledge of her betrothed's deception. She thought about the cowboy who had told her that a liar makes a poor husband, who had shown her what real honesty looked like. She thought about how close she had come to a life built on lies, and how grateful she was for the life she had instead. Fletcher remained the same steady, honest man she had fallen in love with through all their years together. He kept his promise never to lie to her, and she kept her promise to trust him. They built their life together, one true word at a time, one honest action after another, until they had created something beautiful and lasting. When they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1933, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Penelope looked at her husband and saw the same honest gray-blue eyes that had first caught her attention all those years ago outside a Helena church. "I love you," she said, the same words she had spoken countless times over the decades. "I love you too," Fletcher replied. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being worthy of that trust. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." They sat together as the party continued around them, hands clasped, hearts still entwined as tightly as they had been that first day. The cowboy who had believed a liar makes a poor husband had proven himself to be an excellent husband indeed. And the woman who had been brave enough to call off a wedding built on lies had found a marriage built on truth that lasted a lifetime. The ranch still stood, testament to what could be built when 2 people started with honesty and grew it into love. The house Fletcher had constructed with his own hands had sheltered 3 generations and would shelter more. And the love they had created together, born from truth and nurtured with integrity, became a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Penelope Bradford Nash died peacefully in her sleep in 1936, with Fletcher holding her hand. He followed her 6 months later, unable to bear too long without his other half. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, their shared headstone bearing a simple inscription that captured the essence of their life together. Built on truth. Bound by love. Their descendants continued the ranch for generations, always remembering the story of how their family began, how a woman had been brave enough to reject lies and wait for truth, how a cowboy had shown her that honesty was the only real foundation for lasting love, how two people had found each other in a small Montana town and built something that would endure forever. And whenever any of their descendants faced a difficult decision about love or marriage, they would remember Fletcher Nash's words, passed down through the years like a precious heirloom. A liar makes a poor husband. An honest man with an honest woman creates something that lasts through time itself. Truth was the seed, love was the harvest, and together they built a legacy that would never fade.